In this video, we're going to be breaking down the most picked characters and their win rate at the highest ranks to play in Overwatch, so we know exactly what characters people are having success with, what characters people are probably playing too much, and how and where you should be playing these characters. But do me a solid and smash the like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and private coaching links will be in the description down below. Now, to start off with, in competitive for Grandmaster, the most picked character by far is actually Ana at a 22.02% pick rate and a 52.18% win rate, which is pretty high actually, comparatively to a lot of them that hover around the 50 mark. Now, Ana is seeing a ton of play and a very powerful pick, and honestly she sees a crazy amount of play at the vast majority of ranks, even the average rank. I think the only ranks that she doesn't see the most play on are like bronze and sometimes silver, dependent on what rank of silver that they're playing in. But Ana is a very popular pick and very powerful and actually has a decent win rate across the ranks. But Ana is looking like she is one of the best ranked characters to play, and regardless of what is being played at the pro level, just for ranked play, you got to think about the utility that Ana can provide you to have a solo impact on support. You have 75 damage per shot, nades that can just completely carry team fights, and of course sleep darts that can be effectively kills, although at some ranks people just wake up your sleeps, but still combining a sleep with damage and a sleep with nades can be a good enough exchange to kill someone outright. But Ana is just very, very strong and very, very played, and it's looking like that's going to stay true for quite some time. Now, before we talk about the damage dealers, let's continue with the supports in this category. We have Mercy and Kiriko. Both of these are about 15% pick rate, about the same. Mercy's still seeing a surprisingly high amount of pick rate, and it makes sense. There's a lot of characters that Mercy can enable, whether that's Ashe. Sojourn is still great with that one-shot potential when they're being damage boosted. Pharah, Echo are still fantastic, and even Cassidy is actually pretty good with that Mercy pocket. And I think there's something else going on where Mercy is very unique, and a lot of people prefer her playstyle over many of the other characters in the game. So I think you find a higher than average Mercy one trick, or at least Mercy main percentage, comparatively to the rest of the characters in the game. Maybe Rein is like the only true rival to that. And yeah, I do think that Mercy is actually a pretty powerful pick. Still has a slightly above 51% win rate, even in Grandmaster, but she does have some very exploitable weaknesses, especially with the fact that she can't fly around nearly as easily. Characters like Tracer, Discord, and dive characters like Wrecking Ball, Diva, Doomfist can definitely punish a Mercy, and you are giving up some really powerful utility potentially if you're rocking a Mercy. So there are downsides, but if you're playing a poke war and you don't have your res threatened or Mercy threatened themselves, you're going to have a huge advantage playing Mercy. So dive is kind of the true way to counter it at the most bare bones level, unless you're mirroring. Now, Kiriko is another character that we want to talk about, slightly below 49% win rate. And I think it's important to understand that outside of Grandmaster, it just gets worse. Like, Kiriko has a worse and worse win rate the lower in rank you go. And I think that really comes down to the fact that people aren't really accessing the true carry potential of this character, taking an off angle, forcing cooldowns, dealing damage, getting kills. A lot of that is hard to do mechanically, and it feels like you get a bit overwhelmed on Kiriko. I don't think people have gotten quite as comfortable as they've gotten with Ana. And unlike Ana, where Ana kind of stays, you know, in a pretty passive position most of the time, gets to heal and deal damage from a place outside of the fight. You get to see what the fight's like, what's happening in the fight, but you're not going and flanking and acting as a DPS, which sometimes the way to get the true value on Kiriko is acting kind of like a DPS would, taking an aggressive off angle, going for value, getting those picks or getting that damage that baits out cooldowns and going back to your team and still saving them. You have to juggle so many different things that I think it's really hard to play Kiriko to that masterful level, and a lot of people default to a more heal bot centric approach to Kiriko, or even just spamming from their team, and that's going to have mixed results dependent on, you know, what composition you're playing against. I'm not saying that Kiriko is a bad pick. We all know how powerful this character can be, how powerful Suzu is, how powerful Rush is, but it seems that that's just not enough. The character isn't even matching the win rate of Ana and Mercy and Zenyatta and Lucio and any of the other supports right now. One of the few supports that actually has a below 50% win rate. And I don't think that that has anything to do with the power level of the character. It's just the potential is not being reached quite yet, even at Grandmaster. Doesn't surprise me, but something to take note of before you just lock Kiriko in a lower ranked lobby and expect the character's power level to carry you through the games. I don't think that that's true at all. Very hard character to play to the maximum efficiency. And as far as ranked is concerned, I would say that it's probably easier to make impactful plays with Ana. Now, I do want to talk about some of the other supports here before we move on. I did want to talk about Zenyatta, which has probably, I think the highest support win rate, actually. Yeah, Zenyatta does have the highest support win rate in Grandmaster. Of course, this win rate falls off an absolute cliff outside of Grandmaster for several reasons, in my personal opinion. I think the biggest one, especially as someone who's grinded Zen throughout the ranks from Diamond to GM, High GM, GM1, I got like a pretty good picture, not of like the lowest rank, so I don't exactly know what it's like there. Although I would imagine you just get singled out and get no peel, and you have a lot of people complaining about you is what I would imagine. And Zenyatta, the thing about Zenyatta is that players need to adapt to having a Zenyatta on their team. They need to understand that you're not going to be outputting nearly as much heals as a different character. So if I'm Zenyatta and I have a Rein that is inting in as if he has a BAP, as if he has an Ana instead of me, and he dies and feeds, we're going to keep losing team fights even if he played slower, and over time we win the fight because Discord's so powerful. But that's not necessarily going to be the case until you get better tanks. So that's why Zenyatta suffers, not only from the fact that you don't get peel, but the fact that players, especially tank players, don't properly play around a Zenyatta. So I think that's a big deal. But once you get to Grandmaster Plus, players all of a sudden like Zenyatas, and they really, really want to play with the Zenyatta. And I think that that kind of makes it hard to be like a Zenyatta one trick, but still, of course, possible. It's just going to be a little bit difficult. And then, you know, Lucio still seeing 7.7% pick rate. Baptiste seeing 6.42% pick rate. I think that that's underrepresented, especially when we see how the pro meta is moving, where we're seeing brawl-centric strategies. Lucio and Baptiste probably should be seeing a little bit more play, especially when we see Rein have this much play. We see Cass have this much play, and I think that these characters slot into playing with those characters a lot, so it would make sense that these characters are picked more. And then Brig has actually a very high win rate as well, but not picked nearly as much. I think that Brig is pretty underrated, very powerful, and we can see it reflected in the win percentage. But note that as a character is played more, the win percentage becomes more balanced out. If a character is only played in niche situations where they're most optimal, they're going to have a higher win percentage relatively. Now, let's talk about the DPS role for a second. Specifically, I want to talk about the most played DPS by far. Even in Grandmaster, it's Cassidy, 15.71% pick rate and almost a 52% win rate. Cassidy's insane, even in Grandmaster right now, which is kind of a bit concerning as far as balance is concerned, because Cassidy has a lot of natural predators, hit scans that can outrange him. Widowmakers are really good at this rank, but Cassidy's still getting value, capable of being that catch-all that outputs a ton of damage, is efficient at shutting down flankers, has extra health for more sustain, and of course his roll 50% damage reduction. And just the fact that he can generate picks. I mean, a lot of times when you're playing Cass, you're playing behind your front line, whether that's with the Rein or even a Sigma or whatever the case may be. You're playing behind this front line, and the second an opponent gets out of position, you can kill them out of nowhere. One crit, one body shot, they're done, and it's over, and you get to get that pick advantage and just kind of go about your day. And Cassidy's pretty hard to punish as well because you have that nade, so you don't want to stay close to him. So you want to play really, really far distances from the Cass, and then that's going to be counterable in a number of different ways. And I think that Cassidy's really only suffer on the sniper maps more than any other map, and then some of the high ground oriented maps like New Bonnie is going to be a bit hard. But maps outside of those, which is the vast majority of maps in the game, Cassidy is like insanely strong and really, really powerful. And we're seeing that even in Grandmaster. But if we talk about Cassidy's baseline values specifically because of his nade, Cassidy's going to be even better, like the lower in rank you go. There's going to be less characters or less people capable of playing the counters to Cassidy, and that includes specific dive characters, that includes long distance snipers. So Cassidy is like the DPS that you should be playing. If you want to climb right now, pretty much to any rank, I mean, Cassidy is insane. It's just so strong. A character that I flexed to, and it was one of the reasons I had success on DPS this season, is because there were some compositions that I couldn't play Tracer and Genji into. but you can play Cassidy into all of those compositions really, really easily. So I think Cassidy is really, really strong. Outside of that, drops almost in half pick rate rise to Tracer, 8.67%. Still a 52% win rate, or actually more win rate. Tracer's a bit harder to play, and I think a bit more narrow in some of the applications. I think you can play Tracer in every comp, but it could be a bit harder. Tracer's going to excel the most when you're playing with a dive composition, of course, and it can be pretty frustrating if you're playing Tracer with a Rein or a Sigma or something like that into a pocketed DPS in particular, like a Cassidy that has a Kiriko, a Kiriko standing with them or playing with them, or a Mercy pocket. Good luck playing Tracer. It can be really, really difficult to play Tracer. You can still get it done, of course, but sometimes you can't do enough or play proactive enough to carry a game. So I could see why Tracer is here, even though I do think that Tracer is overall better, especially if you just played a full dive composition. Tracer is phenomenal and amazing with Wrecking Balls, Doom Fists, and yeah, there's some maps that you can just lock Tracer no matter what. Still suffers a bit on the sniper maps, of course. And then, surprisingly, we have Soldier as the third most picked DPS. Very, very interesting. I do think that the strength of Soldier is the fact that he's flexible. He's really flexible in the compositions he can be played in. Even though he's never the best pick, in my opinion, I think there's always a better, more optimal pick that you can get more value on. I also think that he's never a bad pick. He can play in pretty much any composition, whether that's poke, whether that's brawl on an off angle, or, you know, even a dive composition. You could play him, take an off angle, go Helix, the Wrecking Ball slam. There's a lot you can do with this character. Really flexible. And then we're seeing like about a mixed pick rate with Genji and Hanzo. Very, very surprising to see this because, you know, the presumption is that Genji and Hanzo are pretty bad. They're not that playable, but I especially think that when you're playing with the dive composition, Genji becomes really strong. And when we're seeing Ana as the most picked support, Nanoblade's still a really, really powerful combo that could just win fights on its own. And I think especially when we're seeing compositions that don't have a defensive ult and can't shut down a Nanoblade, you get this I win button, which is amazing. And if you're playing a dive composition with Genji Ana, you just use Genji as something to go in. I know his damage isn't that high, but you don't need a lot to just go in with your Tracer, go in with your ball. And then the Nanoblade, oops, I win, is definitely still strong. And I think that, I don't want to talk too positive about Genji here, but I think it's actually really, really great. And then Hanzo, surprisingly, I'm going to make a separate video talking about Hanzo, but Hanzo is actually strong, like randomly strong. He's played a lot right now in the pro meta. We're seeing him in the Brawl mirrors because he plays the 5th DPS slot in the Brawl mirror, and he gets to take a really wide off angle, taking pot shots at Baps and Maze to potentially get a pick. And then he's played in the double sniper compositions with Sigma. So he's seeing a lot of play in just pro play right now. And I think that there's another aspect of him where he's just generally good in rank. The one-shot capability is very, very powerful, especially with super strong support utility flying around like Lamps and Suzus. Having that one-shot capability is pretty powerful. And he's also one of the best DPS to actually punish a Cassidy because he doesn't care that you have 225 HP. He's just going to headshot you, and you actually have an advantage in that matchup, which is nice. And you can kind of fight him at most ranges. You're not as map-specific as Widowmaker is. And yeah, I think that Hanzo is actually secretly pretty decent right now, which is kind of strange, but that's just how the meta has slowly moved to. And especially with Cassidy being the best DPS right now, it makes a lot of sense. Now, outside of that, I do want to touch on like Widowmaker, Sojourner, and Ashe, all around the same pick rate. Widowmaker, gonna be very person specific. Even in Grandmaster, not every Widowmaker is like of that god tier level. It's important to understand that there are huge level discrepancies in the quality of a Widowmaker, even in Grandmaster. Even in Grandmaster 1, the level of a Widowmaker could vary dramatically. A good Widowmaker is way different than a insane Widowmaker, than a dominant Widowmaker. Like, there's levels here, and a lot of them don't reach the threshold to just completely take over a game. Even in the highest ranks of play, there are counter strategies to that. And I think that one of the biggest counters right now in particular is Wrecking Ball, who can just make Widowmaker not play the game. Like a living hell, make their job really hard. A good Wrecking Ball will just deny a Widowmaker from taking any good angle, any aggressive angle, force the Widowmaker to play really passively, and leave that Widowmaker open for attacks from other DPS as well. So that's kind of the natural predator, and it's kind of funny because I feel like Widowmaker is a really natural counter to Cassidy in particular, but Wrecking Ball is a lot better at shutting down Widowmaker, and Cassidy's actually pretty good against Wrecking Ball. It's like a weird triangle that's going on here that's kind of interesting, but on the sniper-centric maps, Widowmaker is still going to be dominant. Havana, Circuit Royale, these maps are going to be Junkertown. Yeah, these maps are going to be Widowmaker specific, and it's a lot harder to force a Wrecking Ball on these maps as well. Of course, you could still do it, but it's a bit more difficult. Soldier and Ashe, still good. I think they're really best when they are played with a pocket, but yeah. And let's talk last up about the tanks. So we're looking at the most played tank, even in Grandmaster. This surprised me. Reinhardt, 10.74% pick rate. That's crazy, with a 54.37% win rate. This is wild. This is wild to me that Rein is seeing so much play and so much success, and he actually is seeing more play if we go down into the lower ranks, which is crazy. And I think that Rein is one of those characters that, especially now with this new playstyle, because you can stop your charge and you have 2 fire strikes, he can play really, really aggressive, close the distance, cut off the enemy team's supports for the rest of their team, and play almost like a hyper aggressive brawl that kind of borderlines on a dive in a way. And it allows him to just punish enemies' positions and really, really leverage the fact that if you kill the enemy team's tank, the other tank, you all of a sudden can just completely take over a fight in a way that some other tanks cannot. It's super, super powerful in that way. His Shatter is one of the best tank ults in the game. Even though that Kiriko can stop it, you just wait for cleanse, or you just shatter the Kiriko and make sure to kill her. There's ways to play around Suzu for sure. And then, especially in pro play, we're seeing Rein have a lot of success in that designated brawl composition with the Lucio, Bat, Mei. And Rein has several different ways to just play like a fundamentally good level or a ranked punish level, where you get to punish the bad positionings of the enemy team, force brawls onto bad tanks, a Sigma that's playing too close, not distancing themselves, or a number of different tanks that don't respect your brawl potential, the ability for you to get into range and just swing onto them. And yeah, I think Rein kind of has a lot of the same success that Ana has, where they're just amazing for ranked. They're really, really, really great for ranked, and they punish, they just have a lot of impact, and they can punish a lot of bad decisions from the enemy team. Then there's a huge gap between Rein and Wrecking Ball. 7.44% pick rate on Wrecking Ball. Still a lot of play. Has less win rate, but I think Wrecking Ball is a bit harder to play, and he's not as flexible with the characters he can play with. Well, I think that Rein can play with a lot of different characters. Of course, he's not going to be fantastic with dive, but he can still go in and be hyper aggressive with dive DPS. He definitely could open up those opportunities for his team. Wrecking Ball, a little bit more linear, can play with hit scans okay, because he slams and they can follow up, but of course is going to prefer dive DPS the most, and there's going to be some DPS that I think Wrecking Ball plays pretty poorly with, specifically like characters like Torb, characters like Mei, characters like Bastion, Junkrat, Sim, not really going to play very well with the Wrecking Ball, making Wrecking Ball a little bit less flexible. And I also just think that generally Wrecking Ball requires a lot more individual skill than Rein to work with your team. Like, you can definitely hard carry with Wrecking Ball, but Rein is gonna allow your team to play with you easier. I think I'm explaining this better or correctly, but Rein is gonna be a character that everyone knows how to play around properly. You don't have to really adapt your playstyle too much to make it work with the vast majority of people, because they're definitely gonna enable you, as opposed to Wrecking Ball, where sometimes you have to really play around your team's position and adopt your play in a way that you don't have to do on Rein. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but that's my general idea behind that. Sigma, fantastic on some maps, specifically the sniper maps. You're going to see this character played every time on the sniper maps. You see a much lower pick rate, but a higher win rate. And the reason that you see that is because he's only played on the maps that he's good in. He's only played on the maps like the sniper maps, like Junkertown, like maps like Havana, like Circuit Royale. These are the maps that he's going to be played on, and these are the maps that he's going to have the most success on, and he's going to have a high win rate, you know, relative to that. Of course, you could play him on other maps, but those are going to be the maps that he's the best on, and he's going to have the most easy value. And then we have characters like Doomfist Diva, you know, rocking around that 6%, about 6%, and they're fluttering around that 51% win rate. I think that these characters are a little bit harder to master than the other ones. They're flexible, and they have a lot of good matchups when played properly, but I still don't know if players are playing these characters to their utmost strengths, especially when I see a tank like Reinhardt kind of running rampant. Definitely think that it's very possible to play both of these tanks in a way that just denies Rein or plays around Rein, but you do need some amount of follow-up. You do need to be playing a Doomfist and D.Va with a Tracer or a Dive DPS, as opposed to playing Doomfist and D.Va with a Cass, and then what are you supposed to do when the Rein comes after your Cass or pushes onto your Cass? You could just peel all day and just deny the enemy Rein, but then you're not hard carrying or doing everything your character is capable of. It would be a lot better if you could just ignore the Rein and go on their back line. But if you do that and the Rein goes on your back line, then you're trading and it's just like an awkward situation. So I definitely think that that's an interesting... It's interesting to see this actually reflected in the pick rate, because I do think that Rein, of course, is just going to be an easy counter when properly played. Of course, like I said, you could play like the true brawl composition, which isn't easy to counter, but people aren't really doing that in ranked play nearly as much, as opposed to these like mobile tanks that I think could be played if you just slot it in with the Tracer or a Pharah or an Echo Mercy or something like that. These characters are insane. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to say the least, and I think that Rein shows that still, even in the highest ranks of play, people just play around a Rein a lot easier, and a lot of the tanks, or a lot of the characters that are played right now, just slot in and can play well with a Rein, and we're seeing that reflected in his win rate and his pick rate. So as far as what I would suggest right now, if you're really looking to climb, the easiest characters to climb with, if you want to get Grandmaster, that's your goal. Support, it's pretty much Ana. Ana is the one. DPS, Cassidy, you really can't go wrong with Cassidy. Maybe a Tracer flex, but Cassidy is just really, really, really powerful. And then for tank, I actually just got to give it to Rein. Maybe Rein and Wrecking Ball. You have a little bit of dive, a little bit of brawl, but really, if you just like played Rein on like the majority of maps, and then on the sniper maps you played Sigma, I think you would be perfectly fine. The high ground maps might get a little bit tricky. If you could have something that could take the high ground, it might be better, but you could definitely play Rein with a non-dive composition on New Bonnie. You just route up to the top, you get your DPS in position, and maybe that works. But yeah, maybe have like a Rein and Wrecking Ball. You have the Wrecking Ball for that New Bonnie map. You have Rein for the vast majority of other maps, and then maybe a Sigma flex pick. I don't exactly know what the perfect tank lineup is to be the easiest to get to Grandmaster, but this just shows you the pick and win rate, respectively, of players in Grandmaster, and some of my thoughts about why these pick rates are what they are, why these win rates are what they are. But if you have any other opinions about why these things are true, definitely let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what video you want me to make next. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.